Hey, how y'all doing? Today, me and my kids, we just got done with a Bible study, and we were talking about the topic or the idiom, or I like to call it derogatory, term used against Christians or believers or whoever might have a sense of spirituality, if you want to say that. And it's don't be so heavily minded that you're no earthly good. And we started from Matthew chapter 16, verses 13 through 23. But I want to focus on just a couple of things. I want to focus on verse 23. And Jesus turned to Peter and he said, "Get ye behind me, Satan. You are a fence, a stumbling block, a trap stick, a snare unto me. For you are not mindful, or your affections or your sentiments are not on things of God, but on things of the world." And this came right after Peter had this understanding, this revelation that Jesus was the Messiah. After Jesus asked his disciples, "Who do men say I am?" They said Elijah, Jeremiah, the prophets, and all that different things. And Peter said, "No, you're the Messiah." He said, Simon Peter, God, you got this from heaven. This is a heavenly revelation that you have of me. And right after that, when Jesus started to speak about him suffering many things, as we can read in Isaiah 53, Isaiah 52, Psalms 22, all throughout the scriptures, it prophesied of the Messiah and him going through. You believe that some of these believers, or some of these Jewish brothers and sisters should have known these things. But he was like, no, after Jesus said he's going to be crucified, he's going to suffer. He was like, no, but this is written. And he said, you're a stumbling block unto me. And your affections, your mind is set on things of man and not on things of God. And then we switched right over and we went to, I think it was Colossians chapter 3. And in Colossians chapter 3, it says this. It says, "If then you were raised with Christ, seek those things which are above." It says, seek those things which are above, where Christ is sitting at the right hand of God. Then he goes on and says, set your mind, right? Exercise the mind, set your affections on things above. So now he says, not only seek the things above, but now set your mind on them. And not the things of the earth. But then we can skip down a little bit to verse chapter 7. After he talked about, he told them, therefore put to death your members which are on the earth: fornication, uncleanness, passions, evil desire, covetousness, which are in idolatry. And then he goes at the bottom, he says, in which you yourselves walked when you lived in them. So then after we talked about, the people using this term, don't be so heavily minded that you're no earthly good, we talked about how I believe that God wants you to be heavily minded so that you are earthly good. But at the same time, we have to have a sober mind of who we are. We have to be sober minded. We can't be drunk with pride, how Isaiah would use this term. So we have to remember that this was once us who were in the world, right? I think Paul says it's by the grace of God I am what I am, right? It's not of my own righteousness. It's not because I'm such a good guy. It's not because I do this right, but it's by his grace. It's his grace that saved me. And also it's his grace that sustains us at the same time. And then we switched right over to, and we're kind of building up on, yes, God wants us to be heavily minded so that we are earthly good, but at the same time, he wants us to have a sober mind of who we are so that we don't become self-righteous. So in Romans 12, chapter 3, it says, if I say, so I say, through the grace given to me, to everyone who is among you, not to think of himself highly, right? That's a Greek word para, means near, or higher than he ought to think, but to think soberly, moderate, as God has dealt to each one the measure of his faith. So once again, don't think highly of yourself. Don't think like you have arrived, right? So we're building off of this to get to a certain point. And then right after that, I know I'm kind of flying through this. We had a little more time in this, but the video can't be that long. We moved to Ecclesiastes chapter 7, verses 15 through 18, which says, I have seen everything in the days of vanity. There is a man who perishes in his righteousness, and there is a wicked man who prolongs life in his wickedness. Do not be overly righteous, nor be overly wise. Why should you destroy yourself? Do not be overly wicked, nor be foolish. Why should you die before your time? It is good that you grasp this, and also not to remove your hand from the other. For he who fears God will escape them all. So the whole gist of it is, I know people use this terminology sometimes to come at believers, or people who say they have a faith, saying, don't be so earthly minded, so heavenly minded that you're unearthly good. And I believe through the scriptures, as a believer, as a Christian, that God wants us to be heavenly minded so that we are earthly good, right? But he wants us to have a sober mentality. Think of ourselves not too highly. We ought to always keep in mind is by the grace of God we are what we are. And Paul said at one point, I think before that he persecuted the church. So it's not like I'm it, I done wrong too. I have broken the laws of God, and I think James says that if you have offended in one aspect of the law, you offended in all. So in conclusion, don't be too heavily minded that you're earthly good. Applies to people who are, as Ecclesiastes talks about, who are overly righteous, who have this ascetic, rigorous, higher than everybody, higher than everyone in the faith mentality. You know what I'm saying? Something like the Pharisees, we're better, you're not, and stuff like that. This is the kind of mindset God don't want us to have. But he wants us to have a heavenly mind so that we can be earthly good. All right? So y'all be blessed, and I appreciate y'all. Peace.